Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project. I'm your host, Duc with Tri-City Equity Group. Today we have Adam Adams on the show. Adam has educated thousands of investors through conferences, radio and podcast interviews, his coaching program, and one of the top meetup groups in the world. With Blue Spruce Holdings, Adam is partnered in 7 multifamily syndications with around 1,400 doors valued at around $100 million. Adam's primary role in the company is to attract capital, having raised millions from private investors. With me is my co-host, Vince Gevings.
Hey, Duke. Super excited about the show. I've been tracking Adam Adams for a few years now, watching his growth, watching him build his various companies. In this show, he talks about some of the things he does to drive private investors to him, to his brand, to his companies, to invest in his deals, as well as his underwriting guidance, some things that huge lessons learned that for market research that he's done, and then also a huge lesson learned and decisions that he need to make that ended up possibly costing his firm $500,000. That's 500,000 on a deal that he ended up walking away from in the middle of coronavirus, because it was the right thing to do for his private investors. Preserving their capital is our number one priority. So he walks us through that story. So you want to stay tuned and listen to Adam's story.
Welcome to another episode of the Cash Flow Project. Today we have a very special guest, Adam Adams. Adam is an investor and partner in 7 multifamily syndications with roughly 1,400 doors. He's educated many investors through real estate conferences, radio and podcast interviews, his coaching program, and meetup group. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I saw you talk at Dealmaker Live in Dallas last year and took a ton of notes regarding meetups, branding, marketing.
Good.
You have a wealth of experience and skill set. So for those that aren't familiar, tell us a little bit more about what you do and what you're working on now.
Good. I like that. Let me think. That I didn't expect that. I thought you were going to go with my history, so I got dumbfounded, but I love it. What am I focused on right now? So you mentioned the 1,400 doors that I'm partnered in. So that's a big thing to me, is real estate and real estate investing. And so I have a team that we've put together. There's 13 people on the team, 5 in acquisitions, a couple in asset management, underwriter, etc. And the main goal of that company, Blue Spruce Holdings, is to provide passive investment opportunities to passive investors, high net worth individuals, and we manage those deals even when things go crazy. For instance, our property manager recently passed away, and suddenly, and she was only in her 50s. And so immediately my partner DJ drove out to the property and became the property manager, and he still is there today. He's been there for about 4 weeks, and he should be coming home in about a week. And that's the type of thing we do when the going gets tough, to make sure that passive investors make money. Outside of that, we were talking in the show notes pre-interview a little bit about just kind of what else I focus on. So I enjoy helping other people grow their businesses, and I do that by helping them launch podcasts or helping them grow a meetup group, and or helping them get a virtual assistant. So I have a company called MyVA. So the website is myva.website, and we help people to be able to hire really good virtual assistants. We do all of the vetting. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks. We usually get about 20 to 50 applicants, and we narrow it down to 1 to 3 that the person can hire after a ton of vetting. There's a lot that goes into it that we would do a 2-hour podcast if we wanted to get into all of it. For podcasting, all of my clients so far have launched podcasts that are in the top 1% of podcasts on iTunes. So that's our niche. Our niche is to not just have you have a podcast, but to have you have a podcast that gets traction. And so that takes a lot of my time and energy to make sure that happens. You can go to mypodcast.website. It's almost the same as the MyVA, but it's mypodcast.website. We edit podcasts for you, or we help you launch it. So that's really a lot of what I focus on is just helping other people do what I've been able to do. And by having a good team and marketing skills.
Got it. So how did you build your team?
I did it a way that I don't suggest to every single person. I'll be honest, when we started our team for Blue Spruce Holdings, it was more of everybody was kind of an entrepreneurial type, and everybody was comfortable in the beginning, not taking a salary. And out of necessity for us, we wanted to keep as much money in the bank as we could, so that we could do a really good job. So we decided nobody to take a salary, and we decided to partner, go, equal parts. And honestly, and it was blind leading the blind. I say that tongue in cheek a little. I have been involved in real estate my entire life. My family I grew up in has always owned rentals and land and agricultural land and multifamily and self-storage units and cabin lots and stuff like that. It's been normal. My dad, I grew up with that. And I got involved 15 years ago as a real estate investor myself. So I've been doing it for 15 years, and I've been doing multifamily since 2007. So it wasn't like completely blind leading the blind, but none of us had done a syndication. Not one person on the team did a syndication when we started, and I think that can be scary. Now we've got plenty of experience, right? I've closed 1,400 doors, 7 different deals, about 200 doors per deal on average. But for us, it was like nobody ever syndicated. And so in the beginning, along 3 years ago, when we bought that first one, it was very difficult. We learned a lot of crazy things in the beginning. With other people's money, we learned it. And I don't recommend that for your listener. If they're trying to do it, I want them to not partner too fast with and start a company with other people. I want them to instead partner with a team that's already done it, already been there, and you become a piece of that team, and you learn with experience, with somebody who has been there before, done that before, and will keep passive investor money absolutely safe. They have a long-standing track record, and you provide value on 1 or 2 deals. And then if you want to start building a team, I think that would be a good thing. But my team, we learned a lot, and we actually had a really hard go, and we're still working on that first deal that we bought about 3 years ago. We're still working really hard to make sure that it is a performing asset. And if we had the right people, I guess I shouldn't say the right people on our team. If we had people on the team that had been there before, we would have done a lot of things differently. And so I hope that's helpful for the listener who needs to build a team, to know that, you'll be able to do it, but there's a lot to be said about making sure you do a couple of JVs first.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
That's very important. Again, and then for the passive investor that could be listening is, make sure you do diligence on the sponsor as well. Like, make sure that this isn't their they went to some weekend boot camp and all of a sudden they bought a book and are sponsoring a $3 million deal. Make sure you get the sponsor as well. Who, they might be, the main GP, but who's supporting them? Who's that team that they've built, and vet each person on that sponsorship team as well. So I thought that was a very good point. I do these things called sandbox property is I guess the coin term of like where you said don't partner too quickly on a deal. Also, like, hey, you can go do a small property by yourself first. Maybe it could just be a 4-unit, 5-unit, 6, whatever, something small. That way you can kind of build your systems and kind of build it. And you're not going to go bankrupt if you mess up on a 4-unit property. If it's a 100-unit property, you can go bankrupt or go to jail if you mess up like SEC, right? So yeah, use this sandbox property, figure out your systems, also what you're good at, what you're not good at, figure out your strengths and weaknesses on this little property. Then you're like, okay, now when you're ready to partner, you're going to be more aware of what qualities and traits you want in that partner, because you should be finding somebody that, complements your weaknesses. Because you're like, hey, I already tried this and I'm really bad at operations, like just keeping up with the day-to-day. I should probably find somebody that's very okay with routine and keeping up and being very diligent with their time and stuff like that. So I think that was an awesome point there.
Yeah, so let's go back to that first deal that you sponsored as a GP. So how did you find it? How did you structure it? And who were your investors?
Yeah, our investors in the first one were people that came to my meetup group. So I run a really awesome meetup group. I'm really blessed and grateful, and I just really love the group. That's where my investors came from. I started the group in 2016, and in 2017 is when we were closing that deal. And all of the investors came from people that had known me for a long time. They had come to a lot of different events, and I just let them know that we had a deal and wanted to see if they wanted to be a part of it. And it took only 7 investors, passive investors, at an average of about $60,000 a person. I think our raise was a little over $350,000, something like that. So, and then we closed on that deal. How did we find it, you asked? We found it because after doing what Vincent said, you go in and taking a boot camp, taking a course, and we paid $40,000, 40, I guess it was $39,000 for our education. And we decided to just jump out and take massive action. And the first step that I could think of at the time is going out and getting on Bigger Pockets and setting up those parameters. They have Bigger Pockets platform. You can say if it says this word and this word in the same post, then send it to me, forward it to me. So that's what I did. I put 8 cap, because in our coaching program they said you have to have an 8 cap, which you can't find anymore. And if you did find it, it's probably a horrible deal. So don't buy just an 8 cap. It's probably a horrible deal because you're probably in a terrible area that, yeah. Anyway, I set up these parameters, 8 cap, and I got a notification within a couple of days that this broker in Bridgeport, Connecticut, real estate broker, had a 16 unit, and it was about 1.2 million. And I think the raise was, a little higher than 360,000. One of the first mistakes that we did, by the way, Duc and Vincent, one of the first mistakes that we did there, besides just buying an 8 cap in an area, that whatever, one of the first big mistakes that we did there is we only raised the down payment. And it just seemed obvious to us back then that that's all that we would need to raise. We didn't have a slush fund. We didn't have like CapEx budget. We didn't have money for prepaid insurance. They make you pay insurance ahead of time. We didn't have money for, I guess it's called, what is it called? Utility deposit. We didn't raise any of that. So we had a couple $100,000, not a lot, less than I would hope that other sponsors have, before we went into that deal. And we, instead of making money on the acquisition fee, which is something that we often will do, instead of making money on the acquisition fee, which we were excited, we were thinking, okay, that's going to be like 30 something thousand on a 3% acquisition fee. But instead, we paid out something like 35,000. So we didn't get our acquisition fee. We had to place it into the deal. We were expecting it. We needed it, or we didn't need it, but all of us wanted it. And we ended up having to fork out some of the couple $100,000 that we had set aside into that first deal. So a lot of different things happened, but that's how we found it. That's how we started it. Lot of learning lessons. It took us 8 months to close it. 8 months to close it. And so we started it 1 year, and we didn't close it until the next calendar year. But it's been a fun one. We haven't been able to pay a lot in distributions. One thing we did on that deal is we made it a 70-30 split, but we didn't have a preferred return or anything like that. So if there is distributions, then we just split it 70-30. But we haven't done a lot in distributions because we came out with so much of our own capital in the very, very, very beginning that we weren't expecting to. And the deal the property management company that we had in place when we bought it we took too long to fire them. And they did stupid things like when the bathroom had mold, when the bathroom had mold and we asked them to switch out the sheetrock and to redo the bathroom, what they did is they screwed sheetrock on top of the moldy sheetrock. They didn't fix the leak. It kept leaking. And it was very, very, very frustrating. And so a lot of learning lessons on that first one, for sure. A lot that we would have absolutely done differently. So a takeaway for the listener right now would be, here's your steps before you purchase a property. First step, you raise the money. Before you ever look at a deal, you have money ready to go. Now, granted, I was able to do that because of my group, that it's one of the top meetups in the whole world. It was easy for me to raise the money because we already had the investors primed and they knew us. So that's step one. Step two is you select a market. Step three is you select a property management company. Never, ever, ever, ever just leave the property manager in place. You're always going to have problems that way. You go and first select the best property management company in the market before you ever even put an offer in on a deal. Because when you're talking to the brokers, that's when you tell the broker, hey, I've already got the money, and this is the awesome property management company that we vetted. We're ready to close. That's when you actually get deals from brokers. But when you don't have the money lined up and you don't know who your property management company is, the broker's not even going to show you good deals. So anyway, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Completely agree.
Absolutely. And then the point of the property management company, just to drive that home, is if you're looking at a property that you're building your business plan and everything, and part of it is a reposition because of the bad management on the buyer side, what makes you think that they're going to be any different for you? You're buying this property because it had subpar, high expenses, low income, lots of loss to lease, like all these metrics that you look for in a property, like, value add here, value add here, value add here. And then you inherit the property management company. You just shot yourself in the foot. Like they haven't been doing anything the last 5 years. What makes you think they're going to, change for you? Right. They're not. Yeah. So absolutely drive that point home. Maybe they're really good, but if you're looking at a value add, there's no reason to keep the property management company because they're the reason that there's a value add in the property to begin with.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Good stuff.
So you mentioned the challenges that you overcame. So how's your portfolio doing in this current environment?
Good. Crazy enough, we have one property that is not doing very well. It's in Big Spring, Texas, and the market is fairly dependent on oil. When we did our market research in Big Spring, one of the things that we looked at was to try to make sure that you only had like 20% or less was one industry. What we failed to look at was how many different types of oil and gas industries there are. Like when you add them all up, it was way more than 20%, but with only one, none of them were more than 20. And so we felt really safe. That one started having some issues just in February, which is interesting because that was kind of before COVID. And we have where it's co-GP type of deal on this one. So the main asset manager on that deal, I would like to keep, how do I say it? I wouldn't want to get into a lot of details, but that's our only property that's not performing great. Every other property is performing awesome. In fact, the one where our property manager passed away in the middle of COVID we're at 90-something% economic occupancy. We've gotten paid for all but 3 units out of 83. So we're awesome. Like we're doing really, really, really well on that property. DJ was able to, in one day, he heard that she went to the hospital and he was out there the very next day, or he was at least in the car driving the very next morning. But I think he had to stop once on the way. The whole portfolio is doing great, except for the one in Big Spring, but I don't think it's all COVID related. I think it's management related. And if we had the opportunity to take over it, and DJ was the only asset manager, it might be a little bit stronger. But I hope that helps.
Have you had to make any adjustments, like regarding exit strategies or anything like that?
Enter strategies, acquisition strategies for sure. Exit strategies, no, we're doing okay right now. We haven't changed a lot, but on acquisition strategies, a lot of the value add that we look for, we don't know if that's going to be effective right now to purchase a value add because being able to raise rents over the next 2 years may not happen the same way. And most of the properties that we bought 3 years ago. Most of them we bought 2 or 3 years ago. So they're in a good place. Most of what we needed to do to them has been done to them. But we're not purchasing currently. Like the day that we're recording, we haven't even underwritten a property in almost exactly 3 months. And our intention is to wait at least 3 more months and start looking at like a T6 instead of a T12. People call it like the last 12 months, the trailing 12 months, what before. And I think it would be reckless to look at a T12 and imagine that everything's going to be hunky-dory. So when we start looking at properties again, we will look at the income and expenses for the last 6 months and hold that a lot heavier weight than we would in the past. And the style of value add is definitely going to change because it's not going to be a rent increase play in our mind over the next couple of years. So we're looking at other types of strategies during 2020. We're doing things a lot different when we buy. But for exit strategies, I think we're doing great. I think, the Big Spring deal is having some management issues, but every other deal is performing exactly as we want it to perform right now. So we're happy about that.
And I know that you had a deal under contract during this whole COVID thing.
Oh my gosh.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yep. We had a 250 unit apartment community under contract, and the raise was 6 million. 6.2 million, and we had one big check for 4.5 million that was committed but not yet in the bank. Every other dollar was already in the bank. We were set, ready to close, and based on exactly what I just mentioned, the value add strategy that we were planning on implementing, we don't feel comfortable that 250 unit is going to hit pro forma. And so we backed out of it. And what's interesting is we're in a fight with litigations with the earnest money deposit. And we're probably not going to get the earnest money back. So we lost $515,000 $515 by deciding not to close it because we wanted to take the hit, not have our investors take the hit. So we totally backed out of it. It's not a fun story to talk about. However, I hope it shows a little bit about our credibility, like who we are and how we are, that we would lose $515,000 of our own money because we care that we have good overall relationships with passive investors over the next 30 plus years. So
definitely, yeah, that definitely shows integrity and super respectable to do that.
I'm like nauseous right now. I'm like, oh my God, like what would I do? That's incredible that hopefully you get it back. Hopefully the you can get it back or recoup some of it. But yeah, that's speechless. If I was in your position. So hopefully it all works out.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. But if we get any of it back, it will be somewhere between 50,000 and 135,000.
Yeah. So sunk cost, and that goes to show, like, and again to the listeners, like this is not a game. We're not wholesaling properties. This isn't fix and flip. Like this is there's real stakes. There's real money at risk here. Just goes more to show to make sure that when you're vetting sponsors that you look at, like to Duke's point, the integrity, their track record, make sure that they're willing to jump on a grenade like that to preserve their investors' capital. And then if you're looking to get into syndication yourself, are you willing to jump on that grenade? Because if you're just got white knuckled or ghost face and start sweating at hearing Adam's story, maybe you don't have the constitution or that intestinal fortitude to be a GP in this business, because you're going to have hits like that. And it just comes with the territory of playing the game. So that's,
should we have closed it? We would have made a significant acquisition fee. We would have not lost the earnest money, and in the near term, it would have probably looked like an okay deal. And we don't even know if something bad would have happened, but there's a high enough probability that we wouldn't be able to hit pro forma on a deal. So we had to back out of the deal, even though the money was all raised. It was in the bank. And check this out. DJ, my partner, he hand wrote checks. He hand wrote all of the checks because there were so many passive investors that were in on that deal that what was the cost of sending it back by wire or whatever would have just been just dumb. And so he got carpal tunnel writing millions of dollars of checks handwritten just to save those costs, since we were already kind of losing money when we were leaving the deal. So
hopefully that's hopefully it all works out and there's the silver lining to that, and you can recoup and keep driving forward or fail forward is what I like to say. Whenever I make a mistake, I'm like, I'm just failing forward here. I'm going to be better next time. So, switching gears to something more optimistic, from what I see from you, following you online, you're ever the entrepreneur. You're really good at finding needs in market and providing value to the industry. And one question I had is when you're looking at things like you mentioned, like the VA hiring service, the boardroom coaching platform you have, all the other these peripheral companies that you have that feed the real estate, what comes first? Like are you ever looking for these opportunities? Like, there's a need in the market, or is it like, I did that and it sucked. I want to make it better for, the people behind me.
Yeah. So like the VA business started because I hired my first VA, and then I hired a second VA, and the second VA didn't work out so well, and I lost a lot of time and money, effort, emotional emotions. I lost a lot hiring that second virtual assistant, and so it hurt, and I didn't want to waste money or time again. So I did a lot of research on how do I bring in the right type of VA, how do I find them, how do I vet them, how do I call their references, how do I know if their culture, like when I say culture, how do I know that they're how they are as a person fits with my company culture. So I feel like that's really important. How do I know that their personality fits the type of job that I'm going to give them, or if are they going to hate it? How am I going to make sure that they have the right equipment, the right computer, the right internet to do the job that I need them to do? Because I lost so much trying to have somebody who has terrible internet and a very, very low RAM on his computer to edit my YouTube videos and to upload them. It was just horrible. And how do I make sure that they have the right competency? So those three things. So I figured it all out, and then I saw that nobody really had a company that helped people do that. So I brought in a few more virtual assistants, and I was like, man, like if I package this for other people, they could have really solid virtual assistants, and we could do all of the vetting for them because I've basically written the Bible on this, on how to vet a virtual assistant. And it's worked for me. So I decided to hire a couple of extra VAs and mainly to run my VA business. And that's the same with any company that I've done. I don't look for things to solve. When I solve them and I can tell that it's going to help other people, if I feel like I can make money at it, I package it up and create something. So I help people launch podcasts, and there's a lot of people that help launch podcasts, but they just help you have a podcast. And like, that doesn't do anything for anybody just to have a podcast. You have to get traction on the podcast. So I started helping people just when they launch a podcast, actually get the traction. Because if nobody listens to it, it doesn't matter that you have it. If you only have 20 listeners and half of them are your friends, just trying to support you, like, you're not going to raise money for your deals. You're not going to be able to sell your coaching program. For instance, if you have a consulting program and you start a podcast that just kind of plays in the 99 percentile, nobody's ever going to hear it. You're never going to sell coaching. And so I decided that I would help people launch podcasts that got traction, right? It's just like, ideas will come to me, and if I think I can make money at it and help a lot of people, then I'll decide to do it. So
nice. Yeah, and if for those listening, if you're ever like, oh, how hard can it be to hire a virtual assistant? Go to like Fiverr, Upwork, and type in a word like copywriting. Type in like, executive assistant, and you'll get flooded with, I don't know, somewhere around like 80,000 candidates that you have to filter through and try to find which one's right for you. Across 100 different languages and different countries and time zones. So it's definitely, and I have 4 virtual assistants myself that we recently hired, and the amount of time it takes to, like you said, vet each one of them. And then still you have no idea until they perform. So I just started doing like trial periods, and I let them know up front, like, hey, we're going to try this out for 3 weeks. And here's the milestones I want you to hit. And if you hit them, then we'll continue the contract. So that's what I started doing, was, be very clear and put them on like almost like a probation period. That way it doesn't go 6 months. I'm like, I just wasted so much time on this person and money and energy just to try to save a few bucks because they're in, India and they're $5 an hour. Right. So it's not always that easy.
Yeah.
So before we started, we were talking about what your role in your company was, and you said more of the CEO hat, the visionary. And I want to touch on that, of how important it is to have, either if you're a sole proprietor, you do everything, or if you're a partnership, how important it is to have that one person is like, has the hat on of the visionary and is directing the ship toward a goal, toward the end goal. And it sounds like in your company that's you. And the point I want to hit on is how important it is to work on the business rather than in the business, and making sure that somebody is taking that step back out of that daily grind of just making things happen, and like looking, next year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, and making sure that you're pointing in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, working on the business is incredibly important. That's why you have virtual assistants. That's why I have virtual assistants. That's why my team is 13 people instead of 1. I need to have people around me that are implementers. We talk about visionary and integrator type of the VI triangle, or I think it's incredibly important to have a team, have people that can row the boat. And it's kind of, it helps me feel kind of like when you go whitewater rafting, you have a river guide who he has a paddle, and if he needs, or she has a paddle, but they don't usually use the paddle. They're usually out of the boat, looking, higher, looking over, looking forward, looking for eddies, looking for all of the things that are coming, and making calls like, "Hey, we're going to have to all do this." They rarely row, but if they have to row, they will. And that's kind of like the CEO hat. If I'm a part of the company, I want to be focused on the direction. I want to be focused on making sure that we're in good markets, making sure that we're getting in front of past investors to help them know that we're around. And the companies that I know well that don't have enough people on the team, where the CEO, we'll call it, is really the deal finder and the money raiser, and they just have a whole bunch of hats. For the most part, they're stressed out, and for the most part, they are unsuccessful. And so if you're asking, like, how important is it for you to have a team? How important is it to be able to work on the business, to be able to look at the direction where you're going? In my own mind, it's completely critical. It's essential. And that's why we have a podcast. That's why we have meetups. That's why we host conferences. That's why we do some of these other things, is because we know that it has residual effects for the rest of the company. Is if we're adding a lot of value to a lot of people talk about us behind our back in a good way. And if you don't have a thought leadership platform, nobody's going to talk about you. Nobody's going to know you. If only 10 people know who you are, the most amount of people that can like you, trust you, or do business with you is 10. So we focus on how do we get the most amount of people to know who we are, to put out a message, to add value, to give content, to be talked about when we're not in the room. All of these things are critical to an actual successful business. So essential is the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And you already started getting to my next question here, because when I normally think of Adam Adams, it's the word that comes to mind is like omnipresent. As soon as I go on Facebook, I can scroll maybe like one swipe, and there's a post from you. If I go to any roster of conferences, like you're probably on. If it's a Rod Khleif event, which I was at in LA, when was that, earlier this year? I don't remember.
Yeah,
it was before everything started, maybe January, but I was there for that and you were there. So you seem to be everywhere, and things like that just don't happen. You don't have a podcast. You don't have the best, podcast that's been around for, was it 300 something episodes, or
almost 400 now.
So almost 400 episodes.
Yeah.
The best meetup in the country.
I don't know if it's the best meetup in the country. We're top 6 in the world, and it's not the biggest. Okay, just let me interrupt real quick, and I apologize, Vincent, for doing that to you. I flew to Meetup headquarters. They paid the way for 150 top organizers from the whole world. Like, they flew people in from multiple countries, and they asked 6 of us to be speakers. And I was upstairs on the 6th floor of the Meetup headquarters, and I said, look, the 6th floor is where all the engineers are, by the way. And so here I am in a huddle of engineers, and I just said, why the heck was I one of the speakers? Like, because there's a bunch of people that didn't speak, and they have bigger meetups than I do. And they said, here's the criteria. It's this. So it's not the size of the meetup that made Meetup HQ put me as one of the top 6 meetup organizers in the world, but it's because of hosting regular events, having people come back to the most amount of events, having a high amount of them. In fact, we're number 1 in the world. We're number 1 for 5-star ratings in our meetup group. So we have had over 600 5-star ratings, and we've had 0 ratings that were 4, 3, 2, or 1 star. So we were number one in the whole world for that, but we were also top 5 in the world for having the most amount of attendees that went to last week, and they came this week, and they're going to come next week as well. So having the regular attendees was a big part of the algorithm in Meetup. So if you run a meetup, if you're on here and you run a meetup, make sure you're inviting people to come next week or next month as well, because that continued people showing up more than just once shows a lot to the engineers who created the algorithms for Meetup at the HQ. So I learned some really cool stuff. So we're not the biggest, but we're the highest attended. We see 4,000 people every year. So we're one of the most highest attended in the world, etc. But I hope that's valuable. And I don't want to claim that I'm the top in the country, because I think that there's 2 bigger than me, and they're both close to the HQ in New York City. But yeah, we've done well, and we've had a lot of fun, and I think we've added some value. So sorry to go on a tangent.
No problem at all. So top 6 in the world for Meetup. Again, with the podcast, the huge social media presence you have, going to all the conferences and everything like that. All of this omnipresence is going into your brand, which is all designed for one person, right? Which I recently found out is actually a real person, Siva. I thought that was just like your made up in your head avatar. And then I was scrolling through your board members, like, holy crap, he's right there. Like, that's the guy. So all of it's designed, like this whole brand is designed for this avatar that you have. So I was hoping you can speak on that, and that'll be toward the end of my bit here. But the importance of building this brand, building this this funnel, this whole ecosystem of Adam Adams, all designed for one person.
Yeah. So I think it's obvious that it's designed for more than one person, because we don't want to only have one passive investor.
Yeah.
It's just that, like, if I'm going to create content, if I'm going to write a blog, if I'm going to make a Facebook post, if I'm going to come on your show, number one, I want to help you get the right amount of info to the listener. But Siva is in the back of my mind all the time. Everything I say, how I conduct myself, what kind of content, how I express it, it must be valuable to him, and this is an avatar. And so I want it to be clear that when I help my coaching clients find their avatar, that their avatar has one job, only one job. They might be an electrical engineer. They might be a foot doctor. They might be an eye doctor. They might be a dentist. They might be a certain entrepreneur that started and founded this one company. But having an avatar that is, when you say my avatar is anyone with a lot of money, or my avatar is anyone in their 40s to 50s, or my avatar is any man or woman that does this one thing, or my avatar is anyone in the medical industry, you are missing the boat. You suck at finding your avatar. When you're talking to everyone, you are talking to nobody. So it's not as though I'm racist or genderist or whatever. We have passive investors that are in their 20s. We have passive investors that are in their 80s. We have male, we have female, we have almost every single culture out there that invest in our deals, black, white, Hispanic, everything. But my avatar is 42 years old, male, Indian, engineer, that is already invested in at least one multifamily deal and has enough money to continue investing in multifamily deals. And I have to be able to have a beer with him. And so when I When I think of content, I think of Siva. When he's one of our top, most best past investors that we have, easiest to work with, understands the business. That's my avatar. You're not going to have my avatar. And the big benefit to the listener right now, they can understand that I'm not competing with you. You don't have Siva as your avatar. You might also have an engineer. You might also have an Indian. You might also have a 42-year-old. They might also have 2 kids, but there's a lot that's going to be different about your avatar, and it needs to be because you resonate with them and they resonate with you. When you understand who you resonate the most with, who you want to hang out with the most, it's going to be much easier for you to figure out your avatar. So stop saying blanket statements like anyone who owns a business or anyone who's in the medical industry or any type of attorney. If your avatar is an attorney, what flippin' kind of attorney are they? Are they a securities attorney? Are they a real estate attorney? Are they whatever? There's so many different kinds, and you want to understand them, because when you can put your feet in their shoes, when you can speak their language, that's when you actually start to attract them to want to work with you. You got to understand what they're going through. That's why my avatar has 2 kids, not 3, not 1, not single. He's married, not divorced. I need to be able to exactly speak his language. And when you know who he is to the core, it's much easier for you to attract him or her.
And that goes to that point, if you didn't catch it, was the be able to have a beer with them. Because when I first started, I was like, man, there's so much money and it's everywhere. Like there's so many potential passive investors. And then when you start like getting into those conversations, I've had a few conversations. I was like, man, I cannot take this guy's money. Like I can't be married to this person for the next 5 years. Because one, I don't have anything to get along. Like our personalities just clash. And like so many things. And it's just very important, especially if you're starting to get into this, the avatar, the point of being able to have a beer with them or hang out with them, speak their language, relate to their on a personal level. Because if your eyes are just seeing dollar signs, like, oh, this person's they're a $500,000 investor, and their personality is just not something that you clash with or that you mesh well with, it's going to be a horrible, horrible relationship, as especially if they're like super arrogant or something like that, or they're micromanagers and they call you every other day trying to micromanage your business decisions and stuff like that. Like these are the things that I've seen. I was like, nope, sorry, I can't take you on this project. You have to be able to see that. So that's then how important having the avatar is. And then also adding that, be able to have a beer with them, right? So you can actually you like being around this person, be able to hang out and, just talk, family and stuff like that, talk life with them is very important. So my last question is, what is your favorite ninja trick for increasing NOI by increasing income or decreasing expenses?
Top thing that I love to do. Laundries are always good. Dogs are always good. Parks are always good. There's a lot of good stuff. My favorite one is if you have 100 unit or so, you can pretty much count on around 20 to 30% of them wanting their own parking space, their own designated parking space. And even overhead parking space as well would be wonderful. But what's interesting is they could either park wherever they want for free, or they're willing to pay 20 to 30 bucks, 20 to 30% of the people will pay $20 to $50 additional on their rent just to know where they're parking every single day and to be able to call it their own. They have the pride. They like to know that they're always going to be parked close. And what's amazing about these parking spaces is that it only costs you about $100 in materials, paint and paintbrushes, to go from not having this revenue to having this revenue. And if you have 30 people out of 100 paying 50 bucks a piece, that increases your NOI by an incredible amount that more than pays for that $100 in material on the very first week. The very first week after you've done it, you've already paid for it. And the value of your property based on a cap rate is likely to increase by usually somewhere between 500,000. It depends on the size, right? It depends on how big your property is, but you could automatically have 500 grand in your pocket when you on top of what you would have had anyway when you sell. So it's huge. It's amazing. And it's easy, and people eat it up. Every apartment community that I know of, they want their own. 20 to 30% of them want their own space.
Yeah, especially if it's one of those big, a huge complex, as you said, 100, 200, 300, where you could, like, it's like a 5-minute walk if you don't have that, like, to your car, because you came home late from work and it's 7:00 at night and everybody's already home and you're like down the street, it seems like, to find the open parking. So absolutely, I've paid, when I lived in apartments, I always paid for the convenient spot, the covered spot, right out in front of my door and everything like that. So absolutely. And if you can add the covered parking, if it makes sense to do the covered parking, like one of our markets is El Paso, and it gets like 120 degrees there. So having that covered parking to keep the car a little bit cooler.
And hail too.
Huge. Yep. And hail. Exactly.
Yeah. So what is the best book that you recommend other than Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Other than Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I would say the book that I recommend from this call today, if you want to crush it in apartments, is Joe Fairless. He wrote a book called Best Ever Apartment Syndication Book.
Absolutely.
And it's incredible.
Absolutely.
And what is your superpower?
Probably marketing. I would say marketing, loving people, wanting to connect with people, and knowing how to talk to them.
Got it. And for the busy working professional who's working towards financial freedom, what advice or tips do you have?
I would say 2 things simultaneously. A, you should work your job and make the most amount of money that you possibly can for as long as you can, and while placing your money passively somehow, somewhere, until you're retired. That's what I do. I make as much money now as I possibly can, and I put it all into apartments. So I'm passive in over 1,100 apartment units, not apartment buildings. That would be nuts.
Like Sam Zell level.
So make as much money as you can now and start investing into compounding interest.
Got it. So you've been so generous with your time. So how can people reach out to you?
If they want a virtual assistant, go to myva.website. If they want to start a podcast, go to mypodcast.website. Those are probably the best 2 ways to reach out to me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Appreciate being on.
Whoa, dude, that was a roller coaster. Hearing Adam's story about the walking away from that deal during the middle of coronavirus and the decisions that he had to make as the CEO of his company, and those really hard decisions. And that just goes to show us, what we've been talking about is not everybody's meant to be a general partner, a sponsor, a deal sponsor, a syndicator in this business. You have to make really tough decisions, and a lot of the time it's going to be your reputation on the line and your capital that's on the line that you're risking and on every single deal, because our number one deal is to be a fiduciary, to hold the investor's interests before our own at every step of the way. And that's what the name of the game is preserve the investor's capital before anything else. And he had the integrity him and his team had the integrity to stand up and be able to make that decision and walk away from that property, even if it meant losing up to $500,000 of their own money at that at-risk capital, that earnest money or whatever it was. So huge kudos to them and their team for doing the right thing, that at the time, with the knowledge that they had at that time, was probably the right decision to make. So hopefully it works out for them. Best of luck on that decision and all future deals. Also, huge nuggets for me was capitalizing on opportunities to build other streams of income. I'm a huge fan of, Jake and Gino, Wheelbarrow Profits, and their new book of The Honeybee, where the whole book, they talk about building multiple streams of income that feed into the river, so to speak. And Adam does that perfectly with looking at different opportunities in the space to capitalize on them and monetize them. Like he said, packaging up these different businesses or these needs within our space, whether it's VA, hiring VA firms, starting a podcast, or his coaching platform. All these things are tributaries, are little feeders that are feeding his main trunk business with cash flow injections, monthly. So it's huge that he has that entrepreneurial mindset with everything he does. And that was a huge takeaway I took. Other things was, if you didn't catch the importance of market research, and a lot of people, they get like a checklist of like, okay, jobs check, population growth check, demographics check, household income check, and they never really go down and dive deeper to the granular level of the markets they invest in. And he showed one of the missteps he did was they looked, and the pie chart he's talking about was, you don't want any one sector to have a large chunk of that pie, a large slice of that pie when it comes to job sector, because if that one sector, that one industry takes a hit, then it could dry up a lot of the jobs in that market and have a really bad economic effect on that market. And they thought they did the right thing, but then the way that they were looking at the pie, they saw oil and gas, and they're like, okay, well, that one sliver is not over 20%, but they're missing something of like adding up all the other industries that are either peripheral to oil and gas, like such as the refineries, not just the pumping stations, but then there's refineries, there's other manufacturers that feed off of that main hub that also are affected. So if like the main job sector in that market where all these companies are feeding off of it starts going down, then they're all going to start, it's going to have a domino effect of all these smaller companies or all these subsidiary industries. So that was a huge lesson learned. Like you want to get really granular on knowing that market research.
So if you found value in this podcast, please subscribe so you can get the latest episodes. We would love it if you give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. If you know anyone who might resonate with today's podcast, please share the episode with them. To connect with like-minded investors, join our Facebook group, Honolulu Multifamily More. And if you're interested in connecting with us, go to tricityequity.com to learn more. See you next time.